you said something that resonates again about the, tithe. Do that's what you do, what you've been commanded to do, even though, uh, that's under the old covenant, right? Whatever. We won't get into some of that.
We can cherry pick. We can cherry pick.
All day long.
If it
But
gets
you
you to
said,
put it in the coffer.
yeah, right. And but don't worry about what they do. You just worry that you're following through on your end. And so I remember when I was ordained, and I was working in the suburbs of Chicago, and one of the things that we wanted to do, my colleague Deaton, Professor Deaton, and I, um, we wanted to, and we and him and I ended up doing this because it was just not accepted by the community we were a part of at the time. But we felt like we wanted to do this, and I've always been drawn to the homeless population.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because there's stories there,
Yeah.
and there's so much there. And anyway, what we there's another verse in chapter and verse, I think it was in Matthew, which it talks about when you're giving. And again, this is deep in the archive, so forgive me. It's not going to be a rusty quote, but it was the same sort of concept that you were talking about with the tithe. Don't worry about what they do. So when you give to the person out on the streets,
Right.
don't worry about what they do, because people always would say, well, I don't give to so and so because that $5 they're just going to go buy a bottle of booze.
Yeah.
Okay. So what Professor Deaton and I decided to start doing, we would go to the liquor store and buy the little shots. And
Yeah.
we would go downtown, and we would basically just go and meet, and we'd start talking to people, and they'd be like, hey, do you got a couple bucks? And I just pull out, a little shot of Jim Beam. And I'm like, here you go. And they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. And we went, just do your thing. And we would just sit there and talk. And I'm
Yeah.
telling you, like, that's unorthodox, but it was
Totally.
powerful.
Well,
And
and the other piece of that, knowing now what I didn't know then, is that any kind of course correction that I thought that I was doing for anybody, regardless of their situation, was always through the lens of like, how do we get you back on track?
yes, you're
You
backslidden.
know? Yeah. How do we get you, let's get you cleaned up. Let's get you working a job. Let's get you putting some money in the bank. And magically, anything that led you to this point is going to wash away. And you're going to be, like, how Pollyanna ish is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The church didn't equip us well to deal with trauma, mental health issues.
No. Well, that's
Legitimate.
because it's you lay it at the foot of Jesus. You
Right.
bring it
And
to
then
the
it's done.
cross. And unfortunately, you're right. It's not. And you know, it goes back to, and I've said this a couple times, but it's certitude. It's certainty.
Mm-hmm.
We had certainty. We had all the answers. And when that started to like shatter on the kitchen floor, you know,
Yeah.
and you looked at it and you went, wow. Like, for me, in my deconstruction, which is the big buzzword or cliche
Right.
word or whatever now, but you know um it was incredibly difficult for me
Yeah.
because, as you know, going through 3 years of Rockford's program and coming out on the other end with a job in the ministry, becoming an ordained minister at a really cool, trendy youth church in Chicago, and having, uh, you know, pioneered small groups in Rockford and all of these people that I had an opportunity to influence, right?
Yeah.
And minister to and connect with and build relationships with. Like I genuinely, I was all in. And
Yeah.
when all of this stuff started to, crack and crumble, it was nothing that I just suddenly was like public with. Like
Right.
I was genuinely scared because I knew that I had led people to this place. And then here I am going, I don't subscribe to this anymore. And as I said kind of in my opening, I never sought to be at this place. I never, in my studies and in my journey, said, I'm going to prove this wrong. Like
Yeah.
I chased headlong, wholeheartedly with every fiber of my being
Yeah.
and came out of this going like, what just happened? And then I had to deal with that reality, and it was years had gone by before I actually started to talk about it publicly because I
Yeah.
knew I was scared. And I don't know if scared's the best word, but I was concerned because I didn't want to sit here. My goal was not to take this away from other people.
Right.
Honestly, like I
Right.
remember when I told my folks in the first week of August of 2008, I was up north in my favorite place in Michigan in Higgins Lake, and I remember sitting around the fire. My whole family's there, cousins are there, we're having a good time. The whole time on my mind, this was like day one, all I wanted to do was talk to my dad. I wanted everyone to go away. And I
Yeah.
wanted to just talk to my dad and tell him, hey, look, this is where I'm at. And you need to know that. And the reason why that was so important was because I was also in school going after my second degree now in human services management. And I was taking psychology classes and some of the course material that I was learning was talking about being your authentic self.
Yes.
And I was looking in the mirror going, I'm I'm fronting.
Yep.
I'm putting on this charade because I'm tiptoeing around everyone. I don't want them to know where I'm really at. I don't subscribe, but it was scary, and all I wanted to do was tell my dad, Dad, I don't subscribe anymore because it was more important for me to just be upfront, honest, and my authentic self. And my mom, my dad, it didn't go well. It went over like a lead balloon, and it ruined vacation.
Of course.
But a couple weeks later, I remember having this conversation with my mom in the kitchen, and she was so set on the fact that I was just burned by the church, and that's where I'm at. And I said, Mom, I don't want you to know what I know. I don't want to take your faith away. Well, you're never going to take my faith away. Cool, Mom. That's not that. You know what I mean? Like my heart was, and to this day, like I've
Yeah.
never been this like militant atheist where I'm just
No.
now going to. No, there were times where I have been frustrated. I have been angry. We talked about abuse earlier and the liberties taken and all of this stuff and the numbers driven and, all of this stuff. Like they have been things that I've had to work through. But my goal has never been to sit here and try to pick apart someone's faith and take that from them. If
Right.
someone, like, what's cool though, Jeff, is that over the years, I get random messages on Facebook and they're like, hey, I know that you don't believe anymore. And can I talk to you about some things regarding that? And I'm like, I'm all ears, man. And you know what?
Yeah.
Going back to just listening, they just need someone who is a safe place because it's scary. Jeff,
Totally.
everything I ever knew was rooted and grounded in Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Hallelujah. When I die, we're going to be caught up in glory. And, like
Right.
that is my life. And
I
so
see that hand.
clicking the unsubscribe button and taking some big steps backward, it's not easy.
No.
And
No.
it's interesting because I have found a lot of value. Here I am now, almost 13 years post coming out as a non-believer, and
Yeah.
I am a part of several Facebook groups, the ex-evangelical, crowd, if you will. I don't
Yeah.
know if I think that's the right way to say it. And I are you there? You're there. Video's disabled. I
Yeah, your
I
Wi-Fi is a little wonky here. Is it yours or mine?
um I think it's yours.
Let me
But
see if.
I'll just keep talking on this point because
Yeah, keep
this
talking.
is
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
alive in me. And so I've joined these communities on Facebook, and it's a lot of what I really enjoy about Facebook are some of the groups that I'm in, and I I read daily people who are just um, you know, going through what I went through in 2006, 7, and 8, and that struggle, and they're scared and they don't know how to have those conversations, with their folks and their family, and they're trying to find balance, and it's all they ever knew. And, I've been able to just provide a sounding board, an ear, encouragement.
Yeah.
Hey, it gets easier. They talk about things like every time an ambulance goes by outside, I want to stop and drop and pray. And I'm like, yeah, man, I know
Yeah.
that. I've been there. And that's not a bad thing because there's empathy and compassion there, right? Like that's good stuff. And
Totally.
it's only that lens of perception that they're filtering it through that they're struggling with, right? And so anyway, it's all about being your authentic self. And you talked a little bit about like the universe, and I feel like for me, where and I can't say settled because I'm not settled on anything,
Where
but
you're at now in the journey.
yeah, here and
Yeah.
now in my present moment, I for one, I don't give a lot of things on this level much thought anymore. Um, I just want to do what I'm doing, and I find the value and reward there. But the universe, we're all made of stars, kind of a thing. Like
Yeah.
I dig that. I can appreciate that. Um, I don't subscribe to a higher power. Um, I'm open to it. Please let that be a caveat, right? Like,
Yeah.
while I don't subscribe, it's hard for me to believe that there is an interventionist deity,
Yeah.
because if there is, they're doing a really shitty job
Yeah, no, that's I mean, in the
there.
simplest terms, that's the volley that happens with me. It's that, you know, problem of evil versus how complex the eyeball is. It's like that those two can ping back and forth, but kind of where I'm at currently
Please.
is um it made sense to me that I started reverse engineering it, and it came from a argument that I started to have on Facebook with I'm going to say his first name, Kenny. You know who I'm talking about from the Rockford days.
Oh, I already knew.
Yeah, you know. So very conservative, which that's not the issue that I have with him.
Sure.
The issue that I have with him is he marries Christianity with his American politics. And I have a huge issue with that and always have. Mm-hmm. I've always approached the Gospels as, Christ being the model for Gandhi, Martin Luther King, the saying the unpopular things to power and as a result murdered by the state. Like that, even allegorically, I dig that. Dude. I would listen to that guy.
Jesus was the original liberal.
Yeah, exactly. He was a brown dude, socialist, who just wanted to feed the poor, make sure that people were taken care of in prison. And like that is the stuff that
And he was very much Jewish.
Very much Jewish. In fact,
was not out starting Christianity. He was just merely interpreting Judaism through his lens of perception and bringing forth the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
Like some of that stuff is awesome, man.
Right. And it really set in for me when I did a Bible as literature class at community college. It was like, this is an easy credit.
And it probably rocked your world.
I mean, yes and no, but it's like, it was such a survey and such a like passing, reading it, approaching it like the Iliad, or approaching it like you can glean wisdom and you can glean, insight from even historical fiction. So even if the Bible is fiction, which it may very well be, I have no idea. I'm not here to die on any hill, but there has to be something to be said of the upside down approach to the empire that he was perceiving. So
yes,
with this Kenny guy,
anti-establishment,
we're on Facebook, we're going back and forth, and I go, okay, do you believe in Jesus? To which he said, of course. I said, do you believe that Jesus taught people how to pray in the New Testament by saying, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven? Okay. So now let's reverse engineer heaven. What do we know about heaven? Absolutely nothing. So we can only do a thought experiment. I said, let's start with, what do you think is the currency of heaven? Like, what do you get paid? Well, here's the thing. You don't.
I know.
There is no, you know what I mean? So like, if Christ is saying, let's have it on earth as it is in heaven, how do you carry the water of one of two parties that are dead set on making the most money and exploiting the most resources as you possibly can? Like, those are diametrically opposed. And he blocked me on Facebook, and it was never nasty. I never attacked him, because that's not what I'm interested in.
But you did.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? Like, you did.
Yeah, the dogma.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, right. And that's what makes mega churches and mega institutions, to me, so scary, is the ability that they have for people to seal up their mind in such a way that they're closed to any other ideas, people groups. You look at the most racist, xenophobic communities of our country, they all have a church, and they all go to that church. And there's a white church, and there's a black church, and there's usually a Korean church, and then the rest of the Abrahamic folks, and then the Asian, Hindu, all that stuff. I really do, in my core, believe that we're all touching different parts of the cow, but I also believe, I'll take it a step further. I believe we're the cow, we're the elephant, in that analogy. Like, we are a mosaic of the higher being, which is part of the allegory when they talk about the body, the body, the body. We are the supreme beings, given rationality, given logic, given the ability to retain information, given, a sense of purpose, all of these things that have been used to create man-made empires. Excuse me. I do find comfort in the fact that, like, we're really charged with tending the garden and loving each other as ourselves and loving God supremely. But if we are God collectively, then all three of those loves are still loving self and loving neighbor. Abby's giving me the wrap it up sign. We haven't even dug into any of the personal stuff yet.
Yeah.
So we might have to do a part 2 if you're down.
Well, I'm down, and I knew there was going to be a part 2 and folios and following.
Yeah.
One point, I, in response to what you just said, loving your neighbor as you love yourself. And I'm finding, this may be our segue, I'm finding that in the realm that I'm working in mental health, right, at its core.
Yeah.
People don't love themselves. And how can you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself?
Exactly. And where is that source? And that's where AA is so powerful, not to champion, AA, but the philosophy of but the philosophy of, like, okay, before you embark on this journey, you have to believe something is bigger than yourself. Something is. Whatever that is, that's your higher power. It could be a tree, it could be, a bird.
I struggle with that sort of, because I've gone to AA, court ordered back in 1996. And I remember, like, that being said, and I'm like, okay, how is the table? How is the tree? How is the bird my high? Like, it just is weird. I think it's wrapping up. Go ahead.
I think it's a placeholder, that ultimately leads to whatever, but that happens, deep in your own. It's very personal to you. And it can't be proselytized and it can't be sold. And that's really what it's being en masse is sold.
I was just going to say it, because it really, at the end of the day, they may say that placeholder, but your God needs to be, white Jesus Almighty.
Right.
Just saying.
Right. But I'm open to, I've gotten on, like, a real kid reincarnation rabbit hole where, like, 3-year-olds are like, oh yeah, I used to be this guy James who fought fighter pilots. I was a fighter pilot in World War II. And then they're like, oh shit, here's this guy. He's like, yeah, that's me. That's my buddy Buck. And that's my buddy, and then they go meet these guys, and the 3-year-old sits down with these war buddies, and they're just like, that's him. Like, I don't know if it's true or not. It feels very Unsolved Mysteries on a Friday night. But I'm at a point too where it's like
that one, Jeff.
But here's the thing: I'm at a point too where it's like, what would I be offended if that were real? No. Oh, who the fuck am I to say anything? But I like the idea of thinking that, like, the most racist person I've ever met was, God willing, a person of another race in a former life. And when you reconnect to that, like, whatever that nirvana higher plane is, and you look back on all your lives, and there's, Mitch McConnell or whoever is like, oh shit, I used to be, like the very people that I was dead set on making their life the most miserable in this life. I think that, I mean, this opens a can of worms on, if there were an afterlife, if there were a heaven, what I believe. But I ultimately believe that you'll get there. If there is, there won't need to be a hell, because you'll realize that, like, all of the opportunities you had to do good and be, not do good in the sense of behavior, but I mean, like, be your authentic self. Coming back to what you're saying, like, you're put here to be your authentic self by whatever, the universe, evolution, whatever. Like, no one is as you, if I could borrow Dr. Seuss's, line, but it's wholly necessary to the sustainability of the species and of the ecosystem, really, is that we be our authentic self. And we exist in a system that grinds us down in every way that they can to not be our authentic self. Don't think about it. Go to the movies this weekend. By Monday, you'll be ready to hit those sales numbers and, whatever. What am I selling?
Through the weekend.
Who cares? Yeah, right. Exactly. And it's just, talking to seniors has really opened my eyes and ears. Speaking of like active listening, and they're all like these Jacob Marleys that are like, they devoted their lives to these companies, and now they're 65, 75, 85, living on a fixed income. The government is taxing them on that fixed income, which is the most insane thing I've ever heard in my life. But I'm nipping at their heels. I'm 44. Is the system going to be fixed by the time I'm 65 magically? So it's like, what do you do? How do you love your neighbor as yourself when, there's more need than ability to meet that need?
So a couple things. We're an hour and 4 minutes in. I see this number 6 here with people. Does that mean there's 6 people watching?
Oh, maybe.
That's interesting.
Is that what that means?
Jeff, I don't know. I don't need to really wrap it up, but I understand if we do need to circle back around. And, I don't know if you can break this up into a couple parts, but I enjoy where this is going. I enjoy this. I think there's a lot that you and I can continue to pick apart and analyze. And nice. That was fantastic. My offspring just crawled on the floor behind me.
Oh,
and
nice.
To stay off of the camera. Oh, Jay. That was too funny. And she thought she was pretty clever.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, we can wrap this up. I just, you and I, our classic modus operandi is we could be on until at least 3.
Oh, yeah.
My time.
Easily.
And this has been great. There's a lot of things, like I want to say that, if I were to die and find myself in heaven, because, I was raised to be a Baptist, so I'm once saved, always saved. I got that going for me, which
Thank
I
God.
don't want.
Which is nice.
Yeah, which is not for me. And this is where nice. I'm saying, if I were to wake up and find myself in heaven, I don't want to be there. It's not at all where I would want myself to be. First of all, there's a lot of, mental gymnastics that I'd have to go through to try to buy into any of this at this point. But this creator God that I was raised to believe in, I view through a lens that is, this person is an abusive father.
Yeah.
Why?
Definitely.
And
because
so
of the system that was trying to marry that together.
To find myself to have to spend eons, eternity, worshiping this God? No.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that.
And you know, and I say that with conviction because I know that there may be certain people that would hear me saying this right now and they're just like, I'm so dead wrong and I'm missing it. And I get that because I once preached, believed. I'm an apostate, man. I don't subscribe and I can't wrap my head around that. If anything, I would be open to maybe some sort of deist God, like the clockmaker, wind it up and let it go. Like, okay, maybe I could get behind something like that. But knowing what I've learned and vetted and studied and tried to reject and struggled with, I can't, I just, it's, again, my goal is to not take this from people. When people ask me, I'll talk about it. But otherwise, when they go on about what they believe, I'm not, I support them. I'm not gonna sit here and try to pick apart or ask questions strategically to make them start questioning. No, it's not.
It's not worth it to you.
No.
Right. No, absolutely.
I'm like, I'm for what Sinatra says. I'm for whatever gets you through the night.
That's right. You die your way, I'll die mine. I think that's a great note to end on. Abby's playing me off here. She's doing her thing where she sighs real loud. Do we have some
closing music?
We do.
Can we get?
Let's see if we can get the band here. Let's see.
Powered by Riverside FM.
Ooh,
I like that. Jeff,
be sure to come back.
Powered by Riverside.